Okay, we're definitely getting to the good part. Let's see what happens in chapter 13 in the loft. Wally followed his brothers into the house. It was probably true what Jake had said, that his mom wouldn't miss Wally at all. She'd miss Peter being the youngest, and Jake and Josh being the oldest. And twins at that. But Wally usually got lost in the shuffle. He imagined that if he never came home at all, she might look at Dad someday and say, "Didn't we used to have a son in fourth grade? I wonder whatever happened to him." And Dad would say, "His name was Wally, wasn't it? Or was it Winston or Warren?" "I've run the bathwater, Peter," Mrs. Hatford said. "The rest of you boys can bathe tonight, or you can shower in the morning if you'd rather." "We'll shower in the morning," said Jake. Wally went up to his room with Bill and Danny, but Jake and Steve came crowding in after them. "You have to go talk to her, Wally. Say something so she'll remember you were here," Jake insisted. Wally went back downstairs. Mother was busy making a grocery list in the kitchen. "I've never seen food disappear so fast in all my life," she said, to no one in particular. "You'd think we were feeding a pride of hungry lions." Trying not to think of lions, Wally cleared his throat. "What is it?" his mother asked, barely looking up. She was checking how much bread was left in the bread drawer. "I think maybe we need more blankets in my room," Wally said, not knowing what else to say. "Well, you know where they are. Help yourself," his mother replied. "And then, if they're all taken, Wally, get the Afghan off the couch. Come to think of it, we've used every pillow in the house, too." "Well, good night," Wally said. "I guess I'll go to bed. Bread, eggs, orange juice." "What?" Mrs. Hatford asked. "Good night," he repeated. "Oh, good night. Don't forget to open your window," his mother said. She was a firm believer in fresh air, especially when 9 boys with smelly sneakers were all residing under her roof. Wally went slowly back upstairs. "Okay," Josh whispered, pulling him into the twins' bedroom, where the other boys were waiting. "You'd better take Dad's old parka with you, just in case you get cold. Flashlight? Whistle?" "Whistle? What's that for?" "I don't know, just in case," Josh said. Wally felt sick in his stomach, but with everyone watching, he dared not show it. "Maybe one of us better go with him," said Josh. "No," said Wally. "I can do this myself." He was ready at last, with flashlight, whistle, popcorn, water bottle, and 2 payday candy bars. "If you trap him, come back immediately and tell us," Steve insisted, as Danny and Bill studied Wally admiringly. "We want to be there when the photographers show up." "Just throw sticks at our window or something, and we'll come right down," said Josh. They hustled Wally over to the window and helped him climb onto the branch of the tree. Wally felt like a fireman in protective gear sliding down a pole in the firehouse, except that there was no truck to ride at the bottom. No buddies to go with him. He was wearing so many clothes to keep warm that even if the cougar did show up, Wally could hardly run with the 2 pairs of pants he had on, the 3 shirts, and the heavy socks. The clouds were streaking across the sky, blown by the March wind, and once in a while the moon shone through. Wally crossed the bridge, his hiking boots making dull thuds on the boards, and a phrase kept ringing in his head. "We who are about to die salute you." He wondered where that came from. Then he remembered. It was what Roman gladiators were supposed to have said to the emperor before they fought in the Colosseum. Or right before they faced the lions. He wasn't sure which. Every snap of a twig, every swish of a branch overhead sounded like a cougar to him, a sound a cougar might make if it were stalking him. He had no business in the world being out here at night alone, he knew, but he could be back out in front of the but how could he back out in front of the Bensons? As he started up the hill toward the garage, he thought for a minute that he felt the breath of a cougar on his neck. He wheeled about, gasping, slapping at the air, only to discover that a piece of the lining of his dad's wool hunting cap was dangling down his neck. The light from Beth's window illuminated the ground beyond the house, and he knew he was supposed to wait until the light went on and off 3 times before he left the loft and hunkered down on their back porch. One of the 2 garage doors had been propped open with a brick so that it wouldn't bang in the breeze. Mr. Malloy's car was parked outside under the sycamore. Wally could still smell the KFC as he entered, and he wished he had a piece of it now. He thought for a minute of rummaging about in the sack there on the floor to see if he could salvage something, but decided against it. Laboriously, he climbed the rungs to the loft and lowered himself in his bulky clothes onto one of the cushions. Lying on his back, he turned on the flashlight and directed the beam at the low ceiling. He made larger and larger circles, then reversed directions and spiraling downward made the circles smaller and smaller. When he tired of that, he turned off the flashlight and rolled over on his stomach, watching the window of the Malloy's house. It seemed weird that only a year ago he had been hanging out with the Bensons up here, and now the Bensons were over in his house, in his room, and a bunch of girls were in the Bensons' bedrooms. And here he was at 10 o'clock at night, waiting for a cougar to show up on Island Avenue. Was he nuts or was he nuts? He thought again about school. The week was almost over, and he hadn't come up with one idea of what he could try that he had never done before. Well, at least now he was doing something that was half crazy. Even if the cougar didn't show, he was probably the only boy in his class who had spent spring vacation waiting for it. But how could he write about that? One by one, the other lights began to go off in the house, until only the light from Beth's window remained. Wally expected one of the girls to come out soon with the chicken, but when minutes passed and no one came, he turned on the flashlight again and began making zigzag lines along the wall. He thought he heard a noise and paused. Was it a huff? A puff? A grunt? A growl? He turned off the flashlight again and looked out the window. Caroline was standing perfectly still on the back steps, one hand on the railing, one foot in midair. She looked like a statue in a park, the way horses were often sculpted with one raised hoof. "Hey, Caroline, what are you, a horse?" Wally wanted to call out, but of course he didn't. Suddenly below him, he heard the sound of a paper sack rustling. And just as suddenly, Caroline came rushing down the steps and over to the garage. Wally heard the bang of the garage door and the click of the metal latch. He stopped breathing because the next thing he heard was a huffing sound from below, a soft, almost inaudible pacing, and every so often a whoomp, as though someone or something was throwing its body against the door of the garage, as though someone or something was trying to get out. And then Wally knew he was trapped in the garage with the cougar. He started to yell out the window to Caroline, but his voice stuck in his throat. Was he crazy? Did he want the cougar to know he was up there? Wally's heart pounded so violently he thought it would beat right through his chest. As long as he was quiet, he told himself, as long as he hardly even breathed, the big cat would let him be. Maybe. And then his heart almost stopped a second time. Cat? A cougar was a lion, a cat, and cats could climb. The chicken hadn't even been put out yet. The cougar must have smelled the leftover KFC. It would be angry that there was nothing left to eat, angry that it had been trapped, and if there was no whole chicken to eat, maybe a boy would do. It didn't have to see Wally, didn't have to hear him. All it had to do was get a whiff of Wally Hafford, and it would be climbing those rungs to the loft in an instant. Wally's mouth was open in terror. This was not what he wanted to do for Miss Applebaum. This is not the way he wanted to die. He had always thought death might come by avalanche on a mountain climbing trek, or in a fighter plane downed in battle, or that he'd be a sailor sunk at sea. He thought he'd be given a hero's funeral with drums and bagpipes and long rows of mourners following his casket. He did not want to be found torn limb from limb in the loft of an old garage with all his fingers and toes nibbled off. He did not want his parents saying, "Didn't we have a boy who looked something like that?" before the cougar ate his chin. Caroline had to know he was up there. Wally stared desperately out the window, but all he could see was the back door of the house after Caroline had run inside and closed it. Was she going to wait until morning to tell anybody? Whoop, went the sound from below. Hoof, 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 whoop, whoop, whoop. Wally closed his eyes. We who are about to die salute you. Chapter 14, 911.